Gaza, a land scarred by conflict, a place where hope struggles to bloom amidst the ruins. Here, life persists. This video is about one of the world's longest conflicts that's still going on today. The Israelis and the Palestinians. This land was illegally given to Eastern European Jews by the British in the Balfour Agreement. This is what happened. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.
The Balfour Declaration, as it became known, was a letter sent on the 2nd of November 1917 by the then Foreign Secretary, Arthur James Balfour, to the Jewish community leader Lord Rothschild. The letter expressed support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Many Israelis regard the Balfour Declaration as an historic step on the road to statehood. But others argue that the Balfour Declaration laid the foundations for future conflict in the region. In July 2016, it emerged that the Palestinian Authority was preparing to sue the UK government on account of the Balfour Declaration. Riyad al-Maliki, its foreign minister, claimed that the declaration gave people who don't belong there something that wasn't theirs. News of the PA's proposed lawsuit met with strong condemnation from supporters of the Balfour Declaration. Kenneth Jacobson, deputy director of Israel's Anti-Defamation League, argued that such a move will only play into the notion in Israel that the Palestinians will never reconcile themselves to Israel's existence. As the centenary of the Balfour Declaration approaches, there has been much discussion as to how this anniversary should be marked in the UK. Mark Regev, Israel's ambassador in London, has said he hopes to hold a public celebration together with the British government. However, the UK government has not yet announced its plans. Tobias Ellwood, Minister of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, said in June that given the sensitivities surrounding the Balfour Declaration, he would use the word mark rather than celebrate. Precisely what form the commemorations will take then remains to be seen.
Here's the original letter.
Balfour Declaration, 1917, November 2nd, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours sincerely, Arthur James Balfour.
Now meet our first narrator, Abdullah.
Hello, my name is Abdullah al-Yazouri. I am 13 years old living in Gaza. I made a documentary for the BBC called How to Survive a War Zone. My father worked as Deputy Minister of Agriculture in Gaza for the Hamas-run government. I have been informed that the BBC documentary made by me has been removed offline and can no longer be viewed by anybody. I have been told this is because of who my father is. I'm a 13-year-old child that was born under apartheid. This is a part statement by Amnesty International. This is what they said in November 2022.
Israel's apartheid against Palestinians, a cruel system of domination and a crime against humanity. Israeli authorities must be held accountable for committing the crime of apartheid against Palestinians, Amnesty International said today in a damning new report. The investigation details how Israel enforces a system of oppression and domination against the Palestinian people, wherever it has control over their rights. This includes Palestinians living in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, OPT, as well as displaced refugees in other countries.
UK Labour MP Lisa Nandy is one of the people who has put pressure on the BBC to remove my documentary. This is what Nandy had to say just days ago.
Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy has said she will be discussing a BBC documentary about Gaza with the broadcaster, after it was revealed the film's narrator was the son of a Hamas deputy minister. The documentary Gaza: How to Survive a War Zone aired on BBC Two and is narrated by 13-year-old Abdullah al-Yazouri, who describes life in Gaza during the conflict between Israel and Hamas.
Lisa Nandy does not see me as a human. She has not once spoken about what life's like for me living under apartheid. I'm a 13-year-old child living in Gaza. It has been described as the world's biggest prison. Listen to this article from April 2018.
More than 50 years of occupation and 10 years of blockade have made the lives of 1.9 million Palestinians living inside the Gaza Strip unbearable. That is why they now are protesting and risking their lives. Please note that this article was published on the 26th of April 2018 and is therefore more than 5 years old. Palestinian children and youth grow up in a society characterized by fear, lack of security, hopelessness, and the lack of work, medical services, food, freedom of movement, and other essentials. Today, many refer to the Gaza Strip as the world's largest open-air prison, where the prison guard is Israel.
I am a 13-year-old child. I was born into this life. And now, because Lisa Nandy does not like the mirror that's been held up to her face, she's silenced a 13-year-old child living in a war zone that lives under apartheid. Let me tell you about some of my experiences. The Israelis control every aspect of our lives. Can you imagine what that is like? The people who hate you and you hate them, but they have all the control over you. My daily life, I go around selling chocolates, sweets, and drinks to make a living. Does that sound like I have a privileged father? Or a father that needs to tell me what to say in a documentary? I live in Gaza. It's like the worst horror movie you could ever imagine. I have seen hundreds of people murdered by the IDF, sometimes just because they feel like it. Or it could be for throwing stones at soldiers, kids younger than me. I have seen so many of my friends and family get shot by IDF snipers. They always shoot below the knee. So many of my friends and family have been crippled this way. During the war, there has been drones targeting children, shooting at them and killing them, sometimes wounding them, leaving them with horrific injuries. Children as young as 5, 6 years old. IDF soldiers raid our houses every night, beat up the women and children, hoping that our fathers will try to protect the family. And if they do, they can kill them. So many people have been killed this way. The war, or so-called war, has been terrible. Even when we go to the refugee camps, we still get bombed. Gaza is not safe. The refugee camps are not safe. In the refugee camps, sometimes IDF snipers kill us in there. I call it a so-called war because we can't defend ourselves against Israel. They have all the weapons, we have none. I have to help dig people out after the Israelis have bombed us. So much times the people are dead. We're just pulling bodies out. The fact is, I am a 13-year-old child. That's been born in hell. Every day of my life there has been violence. Lisa Nandy. Do you think a child in Gaza would need a parent to radicalize them? There is death and destruction every day in Gaza. We go to prison for throwing stones. That's if we are lucky and not killed. My father had no influence on what I had to say in the documentary I made for the BBC. Trying to silence me for who my father is means the UK government still feels guilty about the actions it took that's led to over 3 million dead Arabs. Lisa Nandy, clearly you don't like what you see looking back at you in the mirror, because you know that this is what you have been supporting. And Britain and America have been supplying the weapons for Israel to do this to us. And this makes the UK and the USA just as guilty as Israel for committing genocide on my people. This is what the UK and the USA done to us. They put the Israelis on our land, then you armed them heavily. You didn't give the Palestinians any weapons to defend ourselves. You left us to the mercy of the violent people who had just been traumatized by Adolf Hitler. You left us for the Israelis to take the trauma out on us. We have been punished for what the Nazis done to them. I'm 13 years old and I've known no other life. Why are you trying to stop the world from seeing me? I am a human without human rights. Why don't you want the world to know my story? Who my father is that shouldn't silence me. You can't help who your parents are. LBC Radio also put a lot of pressure on the BBC to remove my documentary. From what I know about this radio station, they have always been in support of Israel's actions. It seems like they hate Palestinian people. And now LBC Radio are attacking me. A 13-year-old child living in a war zone. Instead of LBC Radio telling the world about my experiences living under apartheid. And the last 2 years has been a genocide. They use who my father is to try and stop the world finding out what Israel are doing to us. That's the reason they call us anti-Semites. So they can hide the genocide Israel's committing on the Palestinian people. I think the reason that LBC Radio does not want the world to know what is happening to the people of Gaza, it's because they have been supporting the war, supporting Israel's actions for the last 8 decades. The Palestinian people have no way of protecting ourselves against Israel. They are too powerful. Every day the settlers kill our people, and we are not allowed to defend ourselves, or we get killed by settlers or the IDF. LBC Radio never speaks about the plight of the Palestinian people. They speak about the Palestinian people like we are animals. They dehumanize us. They think we are nothing. If I could speak to the people at LBC, I would tell them, my father has nothing to do with the experiences I've had in my life. I was born in a state of apartheid. Every day is like a genocide. I live in a war zone. My whole life has been one of ethnic cleansing. Who my father is doesn't change any of that. We are clinging to hope for a brighter future, for a two-state solution where we can live in peace side by side with the people of Israel.
Dawn breaks over Gaza, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. Now meet our second narrator.
Hello, my name is Aliyah. I am a cousin of Abdullah al-Yazouri. I am 16 years old, living in London, England. I was 1 year old when I left Gaza. Most days I listen to LBC Radio. LBC Radio is propaganda for Israel. This radio station will always take the side of Israel over the Palestinians. They have Israel representatives giving one side, always painting the Palestinians as terrorists. They allow people to come on the radio and say anything they like about my people. I hear people say kill all the Palestinians. They would not allow someone to say that about the Israelis. Over the last few days, I have been listening to LBC Radio, speaking about my cousin Abdullah. Not about his life or his experiences, as a 13-year-old child living in a war zone born under apartheid. LBC Radio are more interested in who his father is, as if that changes what life is like for a 13-year-old living in Gaza. He has seen more death and destruction than any 13-year-old should have to see. Who his father is should have no influence on what Abdullah has to say. Abdullah is a 13-year-old boy, who every day has to help dig with his bare hands to get people out of buildings, after bombings by the Israelis. Most of the time the people are dead, or will have terrible injuries, women and little children younger than him. This is the experiences of a 13-year-old child living in a war zone. Think of what you were doing at 13. I was going to school, hanging out at the park, playing tennis and football, going to bed knowing I'm safe. Abdullah has never had that in his 13 years of life. But who his father is, that is more important to the people at LBC. I think this must be because of their support for Israel's genocide on the Palestinian people. So they try to hide the experiences of my 13-year-old cousin. LBC radio presenters are always interviewing Israeli politicians, helping them to spread their propaganda. It's always very one-sided. They allow them to say they want to kill as many Palestinians as possible without challenge. LBC radio allows callers to come on the radio and say the most horrendous things about the Palestinian people. That we are all terrorists, and we hate Jewish people. This is not true. Our dislike for the Israelis is not because they're Jewish. It is because they are killing us every day. They have Gaza under occupation. Palestinians are living under apartheid. The Palestinians have no protection. But the people at LBC call us anti-Semitic. LBC radio presenters like Nick Ferrari are racist. They say the Palestinians are terrorists, and they think it's okay for the Israelis to commit genocide on the Palestinians. Listen to what the UK PM said he was the leader of the opposition at the time. Here is what he said on LBC Radio, on the Nick Ferrari show.
Speaking to Nick Ferrari from the Labour Party conference, Sir Keir told LBC, Hamas actions are terrorism and Israel has the right to defend herself. Israel has the right to do everything it can to get those hostages back safe and sound. Hamas bears responsibility, he added. He said the world has obviously witnessed terrorist acts carried out by Hamas. He also said Israel has the right to withhold power and water from Palestinian civilians. Obviously, everything should be done within international law, he added. I'd call on all responsible states to call this out for what it is in utterly condemning these actions from Hamas, he added. He said that long-term, a peaceful solution must be found and talks around a two-state solution need to resume.
Sheila Fogarty is another LBC presenter who always backs up Israel's actions. The way she speaks about Palestinian people is highly offensive. She looks down on them. Fogarty only spreads propaganda for Israel. When Fogarty was speaking about my cousin Abdullah, she never once mentioned what life is like for a 13-year-old child living under apartheid. and the last 2 years in a state of genocide. Fogarty should be ashamed of herself, but I suppose as a childless woman she is compassionless. And then there's Ian Dale. This LBC presenter will take Israel's side no matter what they do. This man is racist and so hateful towards the Palestinians, a useful idiot for Netanyahu, and will always use his platform to spread hate against the Palestinians. He's a violent homosexual. Here is an article about his violence.
The publisher of ex-Labour spin Dr. Damien McBride has received a police caution after a scuffle in Brighton. Ian Dale and anti-nuclear campaigner Stuart Holmes tussled out of shot of a live television interview on Tuesday. Mr. Holmes had been waving a poster behind Mr. McBride, who was being interviewed on the seafront. Mr. Dale, 50, who has admitted common assault, apologised on his blog, saying he had behaved in a frankly idiotic way.
Tom Sobrick, LBC presenter, is another one of Israel's useful idiots. He 100% always backs Israel's actions, often calling people anti-Semitic for the bare mention of the Palestinians' treatment at the hands of the Israelis. Sobrick will always cut people off the radio immediately if they stand up for the Palestinian people. This is a man who has that old-fashioned red-faced colonialist mentality, one of LBC's youngest presenters, but he is a non-progressive, far-right Israel crony. Tom Swarbrick is a dishonest and incompetent journalist who spreads fake stories. Listen to this, how incompetent and fake he is.
Tom Swarbrick is an LBC presenter and former advisor to Theresa May as fake news, crisis management and communications. It was in 2016 that Tom was hired by Downing Street as an advisor to Prime Minister Theresa May. During his time working within the government, he was by the side of the Prime Minister when she danced on stage looking like a woman with no rhythm. And then the words was falling off the display on the stage. There was invaders on stage. A man got on the stage, gave the PM a resignation letter. The Prime Minister had a massive coughing fit. He was also by her side when Donald Trump was elected president, and Article 50 was triggered. And the Brexit negotiations started, and he's believed to have advised the Prime Minister very, very poorly. Leading to the disaster of Boris Johnson, Swarbrick was also by her side for the general election.
The Israelis use snipers F-35 jets, tanks, 2,000-pound bombs, on Palestinians all the time. The IDF raid their houses all the time. We are talking daily. While Israelis live in bomb-proof houses, they are protected by the Iron Dome. The IDF are the most violent army in the world. Israelis can and do kill Palestinians without any consequences. The settlers steal Palestinian land. They never speak about any of that. It's always bad things about the Palestinians.
Thanks for watching to this point. Hello, my name is MC John Ribbs. My whole life I've been watching this conflict, the Israelis and the Palestinians. On TikTok, there's been over 120 million hits in support of the Palestinians. There has been 2.5 million hits in support of Israel. So why are the people of all these countries in support of the Palestinians, but all the governments are in support of the Israelis? At school, I learned about the 100 Years' War, and I remember thinking, what's that all about? A war for 100 years. This history class must be wrong. Well, how wrong was I? 8 decades later, nearly 3 million dead Arabs, most of them civilians, 150,000 Israelis dead, most of them soldiers. The Israelis, the UK and the USA really want or need you to believe that this is about Arabs hating Jews. It's nothing to do with that. This is about land and the stealing of that land. The Balfour Letter gives warnings of future conflicts, and here we are 8 decades in. Still no end in sight. The original Balfour Letter speaks of future conflicts, but yet for all they tell us, oh no, this is all about anti-Semitism. Even with the original warnings, they still tell you it's about anti-Semitism. They do that because it's a way of shutting you down. The Israelis have never wanted a two-state solution. The UK government has never wanted a two-state solution. The US government has never wanted a two-state solution. If any of these people wanted a two-state solution by now, it would have happened. The Israelis have been voting in some of the most hard-line, far-right governments. You do not do that unless you want your neighbours to be crushed. They have continually built on Palestinian land over the original borders. The settlers are completely out of control. They murder Palestinians on a daily basis with the full support of the Netanyahu government. Now listen to how much money the USA has given to Israel since 1948. Remember, this is how much it costs to commit genocide, apartheid, crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing on a people who can't defend themselves.
Since Israel's founding in 1948, it has received $158 billion in military aid from the United States, making it the greatest recipient in history.
What about the UK?
According to the Campaign Against Arms Trade, the UK has granted arms export licenses to Israel amounting to £574 million, $727 million, since 2008, including £42 million, $53 million, in 2022.
Well, you can see by who's giving Israel the money to commit genocide. Such heinous offences, apartheid, genocide, ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity. Yes, it's the old colonialist. And remember, the rest of the Western nations have also been sending money and weapons to Israel. So where do Hamas get their billions in weapons from?
Is that some kind of joke? It's millions. If we had the same weapons as the Israelis, we could defend ourselves much better. According to a 2020 U.S. Department of State report, Iran provides about $100 million annually to Palestinian militant groups, including Hamas. As of 2023, according to an Israeli security source, Iran had significantly increased its funding for Hamas to $350 million a year.
The only people who are giving the Palestinians weapons to defend themselves is Iran, but nowhere near the amount of money that's given to Israel to commit genocide on the Palestinian people. The world has come together to give Ukraine weapons to defend themselves against the Russians. Why has the world not come together to give the Palestinians weapons to defend themselves against the Israelis? You may believe that I lean heavily towards the Palestinians in my summary. And yes, I do. The original Balfour letter says they are going to give the Jewish Zionists the land that belongs to the Palestinians. And the reason I heavily blame the Israelis for this situation and the length of the conflict, it's because the Palestinians have no power. Think about it. The West have spent billions for Israel to commit genocide. They have branded any Palestinian fight back as terrorism. Now you listen to this report and tell me, who are the terrorists? Is it the people who are getting the hundreds of millions of dollars, or the people who are getting the billions? Is it the people that kill hundreds, or the people that kill thousands? You tell me, who are the real terrorists? Well,
Israeli army operates at a location given as southern Lebanon by Ellen Nickmeyer. Associated Press, U.S. military aid for Israel tops $17.9 billion since last October 7th, World October 7, 2023, Washington AP. The United States has spent a record of at least $17.9 billion on military aid to Israel since the war in Gaza began and led to escalating conflict around the Middle East, according to a report for Brown University's Costs of War project, released Monday on the anniversary of Hamas's attacks on Israel. An additional $4.86 billion has gone into stepped-up U.S. military operations in the region since the October 7, 2023, attacks, researchers said in findings first provided to the Associated Press. That includes the costs of a Navy-led campaign to quell strikes on commercial shipping by Yemen's Houthis, who are carrying them out in solidarity with the fellow Iranian-backed group Hamas. The report, completed before Israel opened a second front, this one against Iranian-backed Hezbollah militants in Lebanon, in late September, is one of the first tallies of estimated U.S. costs as the Biden administration backs Israel in its conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon and seeks to contain hostilities by Iran-allied armed groups in the region. The financial toll is on top of the cost in human lives. Hamas militants killed more than 1,200 people in Israel a year ago and took others hostage. Israel's retaliatory offensive has killed nearly 42,000 people in Gaza, according to the territory's health ministry, which does not distinguish between civilians and combatants in its count. At least 1,400 people in Lebanon, including Hezbollah fighters and civilians, have been killed since Israel greatly expanded its strikes in that country in late September. The financial costs were calculated by Linda J. Bilmes, a professor at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government, who has assessed the full costs of U.S. wars since the September 11, 2001, attacks, and fellow researchers William D. Hartung and Stephen Semler. Here's a look at where some of the U.S. taxpayer money went. Record military aid to Israel, a protege of the United States since its 1948 founding, is the biggest recipient of U.S. military aid in history, getting $251.2 billion in inflation-adjusted dollars since 1959, the report says.
After the 7th of October, Israelis had every right to defend themselves against the terrorist act committed by Hamas. But they went about it in completely the wrong way. They dropped over 500 2,000-pound bombs on Gaza, destroying hospitals, schools, mosques, museums, residential homes, even though they had killed 80% of the terrorists that had attacked them on the 7th of October. They should have gone into Gaza to get the rest of the terrorists and free the hostages, instead of bombing Gaza back into the Stone Ages. But the Israelis was far too afraid to fight a guerrilla war. The only country helping the Palestinians with weapons is Iran, and they have made the Iranians into a worldwide pariah. South Africa has gone the legal route, and all of a sudden, the Americans are trying to pick on them. And do remember, South Africa was under apartheid, and if you read the horrors, the horrific stories, you would understand how evil these colonialists truly are. The South African apartheid, strangely enough, started in 1948 as well. And my final words are these. Vice President Harris lost the election because of her support for Israel. Now, it's not just her, it has been the US government forever. Netanyahu is an indicted war criminal, so why was he in the Oval Office in 2025 while he's wanted by the International Criminal Court, standing there giving a press conference with Trump, knowing he's responsible for the carnage in Gaza? Without any doubt, Benjamin Netanyahu is the most evil man to have lived since Adolf Hitler. The Jewish community should be ashamed of that, and they should never allow what happened to them to be done to a different group of people by Jewish people.
Always remember, in this conflict, one thing that they do to shut you down all the time is to call you anti-Semitic. Don't fall for it. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.